Hello YouTube! So a little while ago I took a philosopher personality test which measures which of 7 philosophers I resemble the most. Well, they've made another one. Uh, this is another philosopher personality test which is going to tell me which of 7 other philosophers I resemble the most. So, time to do some more science today. Okay, obviously this is all very silly, but it's a bit of fun. Yeah, let's get going with this. Okay, question one: the traditional gender roles assigned to men and women are harmful and should be dismantled. Well, I'm going to say that I lean towards agreeing with this. The reason why I lean towards agreeing with it is because I think that the traditional gender roles have a bunch of normative expectations built into them. If somebody acts in some way that violates the gender norms, then they can expect to meet with some sort of social disapproval, or maybe even something worse than disapproval. And that is, that's not something I approve of. I don't want to live in a world, where people feel like they can't express themselves because it, violates the normative expectations associated with their gender, right? Like if a man wants to wear a dress, great, knock yourself out. I don't think I don't think there should be any kind of blame or embarrassment or anything associated with that. So, in that respect, I would say that yeah, I'm not really in favour of these gender norms. Um, Having said that, I think so. To say that these gender roles should be dismantled, uh, I kind of feel like that's a bit too strong because well, here's the thing. It's very difficult for me to envisage a world where we have abolished gender difference. It seems to me that gender is connected in, sometimes quite complex ways, but it's still connected with biological differences. So, we start out with this biological distinction between males and females, and human beings, they have all of this social and psychological stuff going on, which sort of elaborates from that. So I'm certainly not saying that gender is merely biological, but there are sort of pretty tight correlations between the gender somebody identifies as and their biological properties. And I mean, there are biological differences between males and females. One obvious thing is that, okay, women get pregnant, men don't. Of course, not all women get pregnant, but that's a pretty significant difference. It makes a significant difference to a person's life, a person's existence in the world. If like you are the person who is carrying a baby for 9 months, versus somebody who doesn't do that. So again, obviously, not all women get pregnant, but the fact that that's something that women do is going to have an impact. It's going to have a social impact. And I mean, that's not the only difference. There are differences in sort of strength, for instance, which, I mean, that's probably going to have a bit of a social impact as well. So the point is it is. I think the thing is that if you have as the ideal the sort of total abolition of any any kind of social difference between men and women. Um, I mean, I don't know how you achieve that without without like extreme authoritarianism. It just seems like men and women are probably like that distinction is if you kind of give people the liberty to live as they choose, the fact that there are these genuinely significant biological differences between males and females is probably going to lead to there being some sort of gender distinction. I would expect that, and I think that's okay as long as you're not, as long as it's not treated as a normative requirement that people follow the norms of their gender. So that's why I say kind of agree, leaning towards agree, but I don't go all the way in fully agreeing. Okay, question two. There are no stupid questions in life. Anything is worthy of examination. Absolutely, sure. Anything is worthy of examination. And I suppose there are some questions. I mean, look, there are some, obviously, there are some questions you can ask that are stupid, but I think the point that the spirit of this statement is a good one. So I'm going to say I fully agree with that. Yes, we can be pedantic and or whatever, but I no, the spirit, I agree with this. So I'll just say that and move on to the next. God exists and is the source of all truth and goodness. Well, I'm not a believer in God. I don't see any particularly good reason to believe in God. And in fact, I'm not sure I even buy the ideas of truth and goodness. So, no, I mean, look, I'm quite happy to say that there are things that are true and that there are things that are good. But when it comes to both of these, I tend to take a sort of, well, anti-realist or relativist approach. Like, ultimately, I think that whether or not a statement is true is going to be dependent on some perspective from which we're evaluating that statement. And, like, we construct those perspectives. So I take it to be true, for instance, that the sky is blue, but when I say that the sky is blue, I'm obviously idealizing in a pretty significant way. I'm assuming, for instance, that there is this thing, the sky. I mean, there are, and certainly, in terms of my own like experiences, okay, yeah. I mean, I look up, and there it is. There's the sky, and it has a particular color. But obviously, if one was to kind of take a slightly different kind of view of this, if you were to go through the atmosphere, there's no thing there. It's not like there's really a surface. Rather, the sky is a product of, well, we think, scattering of light. And of course, the sky is blue is a simplification. The sky is not blue. It can be black, it can be grey, it can be yellow, it can be red, it can be all of these things. So, I have certain standards of evaluation, which mean that the kind of simplification involved in saying the sky is blue comes out as true. But ultimately, like, that's, I'm choosing to classify things in the world in a particular way. I'm choosing to hold certain standards of evaluation, and that's what the truth of that statement is going to be dependent on. Similarly, with goodness, I'm an anti-realist about value. When I say that something is good, I mean that it's something that I have a kind of positive attitude towards. So I am going to disagree quite strongly with this one. Okay then, reason is the most important guide for understanding the world. I think this is a tricky one because, I mean, look, as far as I can tell, there aren't really any guides for understanding the world that are much better than reason. But I'm also not convinced at all that reason is a particularly effective guide for understanding the world. In fact, I tend to think that reason is self-destructive. So, the rules of reason, as it were, or the conventions of reason, when applied without any kind of constraint, will lead to just total skepticism. I mean, I find a lot of skeptical arguments compelling. So, for me, if you want to understand the world, well, I mean, landing in a kind of radical skepticism where you just suspend judgment about everything is kind of missing the point, right? Like, if my goal is to have beliefs about the world, I don't think that reason is actually very effective at getting you there. In order to have beliefs about the world, I have to take leaps of faith. I have to make assumptions. So, yeah, I would say I sort of lean towards disagreeing with this. Even though, of course, I do enjoy reason. I enjoy, forming propositions, making inferences between propositions, talking about good inferences and bad inferences and so on, making arguments. That's all great, and it certainly is one of the things I use to form beliefs. But it can't be the whole story. Oops. Just went through two of them there. Okay, so I am justified in being hostile and aggressive towards others who do not agree with me or challenge me. No, obviously. Who's going to say that they agree with that? I mean, I guess there are some people who would agree with that. No, I'm a very peaceful person. I don't really get particularly hostile or aggressive at all. I don't think. And certainly not just because somebody disagrees with me. I quite value variety of opinion. I mean, it's kind of it's sort of the point that mill raised. You know, uh, it's worthwhile to have people out there holding different views, because, well, first of all, you have to recognize I could be mistaken. I'm not perfect, right? So it's worth having somebody who's defending alternative positions, because I might actually be wrong, and so it would be valuable to learn that. But even if I'm right, having somebody who defends alternative opinions means that I am presented with a challenge, and then I have to respond to that challenge. And by responding to that challenge, I may well come to understand and appreciate my own views uh, in more depth. Like you, you understand. So if my opinions are correct, then in order to understand why they're correct, it's worth, putting them in conflict with alternative opinions. Um, that makes sense to me, and I think that's obviously how a lot of philosophy actually works. I can't imagine any philosopher agreeing with this. Um, but of course, if there are any philosophers who agree with it, it would be worthwhile having them defend that opinion, right? Okay. Anyway, I am a careful and rigorous thinker known for my clear and logical arguments. This is the sort of thing where I feel like it's not really up to me to decide that. Maybe other people should say this. But, I mean, realistically, like, yeah, probably. That's probably true. Uh, that probably is what I'm known for. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm known for my YouTube channel, and I tend to approach things in a broadly analytic way. I mean, I was trained in the analytic tradition. Obviously, analytic philosophy isn't everything, but that is what I do. That is how I've been trained, and so obviously, analytic philosophy is where you go if you're looking for clear and logical arguments, or at least that's how analytics like to see themselves, right? They value clarity and logic and precision and rigor. So yeah, I'm probably known for this. Um, the individual's subjective experience is more important than objective truth. I mean, for me, absolutely. Like, ultimately, look, I don't really care about if there is objective truth, which, I mean, so first of all, I don't really buy the idea of objective truth, right? As I've kind of already hinted at, I don't even think there is objective truth. So, okay, um, you know, we're not even going to get that. But even if there was objective truth, I would certainly think that, yeah, subjective experience is what is more important. Like, ultimately, what I care about is that I have a good time. I am the kind of person who would absolutely get into Nozick's experience machine in a heartbeat, right? Like, if you offered me a machine where I could get into it and it would sort of stimulate my brain to give me the illusion of really pleasurable experiences, sure, I'd do it. I don't have any problem with that. Um, yeah, I think that look, what matters to me is that I'm happy and I experience pleasure, and I want the same for other people. I don't think that uh, it really matters really whether or not you have like the right beliefs about the world. I mean, obviously, yeah. I mean, somebody might have the goal of gaining true beliefs, and so I suppose it would be valuable for them to gain true beliefs. But if we're being honest, you never. Even if I have true beliefs, here's the thing: even if I have true beliefs, it's not like they're just going to declare their truth, right? Beliefs do not come to you with little tags on them that say, true or false. So even if all my beliefs were true, it's not something that I would really be able to like directly access. Whereas my immediate experiences, well, I mean, if I'm happy, I just feel happy, and that's that. If I'm sad, I just feel sad, and that's that. It's there's less of a gap, right? Like with truth, with objective truth, especially. Um, the best that I can do is sort of say that my beliefs are justified, and then I can hope that that's enough. Um, so yeah, I mean that's one issue, and so I'm going to say that I agree pretty strongly with that one. I would, and of course, I mean, I take it that there are all sorts of contexts where actually I will hold false beliefs. So the belief the sky is blue, okay, well, yeah, I mean, there are certain perspectives where I can say that that comes out as true, but then I can also adopt perspectives where that comes out as false, but I'm not going to stop, when I'm interacting with people in daily life, I'm not going to stop thinking of the sky as blue. Um, okay. The state is the highest form of human organization. Accomplishing a greater state has a moral purpose. Um, well, no. Highest form of human organization is a bit. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm assuming that they mean that in a kind of normative way. So when I'm looking at this, I'm treating highest form as being like the best form. Um, no, I don't agree with that at all. I mean, I think that uh, state government, that sort of thing is highly problematic. I don't know what the best form of probably the best form of human organization is just when you have like a couple of friends sitting and chatting. I think that's probably human organization at its best. People who just enjoy each other's company, interacting with each other because they want to. When you start talking about the state, I mean, look, the state may well achieve great. I mean, first of all, my like inclinations, if anything, are fairly anarchistic. But even putting that aside, I mean, you know, with the state, there's a lot of like necessary evil. Even if ultimately you think that um, government is justified, um, it's there's still a problem of justifying it, right? Is like we still recognize that, yeah, the fact that we have these systems which require us to, coerce other people, that require us to punish people, and so on. Like that's kind of bad. The fact that we have like economic organization which leads to some people ending up in poverty, right? That's a cost, and maybe it's worth it, right? Maybe it's one of those cases where like a rising tide lifts all boats, or maybe it doesn't lift all boats, but maybe the fact that it lifts enough boats just makes it worth it, that you end up with a lot of people in poverty, or that you end up with, I don't know, innocent people being sent to prison. But those seem like genuine costs, and so that is a problem. I also think that these sorts of large institutional systems are very easily open to corruption. You get regulatory capture and all sorts of dodgy deals going on behind the scenes. It's not at all clear that that like the state is really ever going to be acting in the interests of the population. Again, maybe we can imagine ideals where it does that, but in the real world, that's not really what happens. And I mean, accomplishing a greater state has a moral purpose. I mean, I can see that there would be some moral point to it, right? So you might kind of make the sort of contractarian kind of argument that, you know, uh, it's there's like it's worthwhile for us all to agree to live in accordance with these rules because we recognize that by living in accordance with these rules, we make everybody better off. That kind of reasoning. So, yeah, I mean, obviously we might have some moral aims when constructing states, but I don't think that there's anything intrinsically good about it. It's not good in itself, and it has a lot of costs. So I'll say I disagree. Uh, Gender equality has already been achieved in the West, and further action is unnecessary. Well, we've come a very long way. But it doesn't seem like we're completely equal. It seems like there's still, various respects in which, you know, both women and men actually sort of suffer set obstacles, let's say, in virtue of their gender, and that kind of sucks. So, yeah, I would say I disagree with that. Um, I'm often bored with the ordinary and commonplace. Absolutely not. At least not ordinary things. I find a lot of value in lots of just ordinary things. I can be very happy, just sitting and looking at a wall, for example. Uh, I mean, I take it that really this is kind of the message of a lot of the art that I'm really into. My favourite artist is John Cage, uh, and he's famous for 433. 433 is sometimes said to be 4 minutes 33 seconds of silence. That's not actually true. Part of the reason why it's not true is because actually 433 can it has any length of time, and it's also, more importantly, it's not silence. 433 consists of whatever sounds happen to be occurring during the performance of the piece, and that's crucially different. So when you perform 433, I can perform it right now. I can just sit and listen to whatever sounds are currently occurring, and I can find enormous aesthetic value in those sounds, right? Like the hum of the computer. What am I hearing right now? There's a hum of the computer, and then there's a slightly just audible hum of what I think is the refrigerator. But you know, you go into a house and you get that, like, there's just a sort of house hum that every house has. I think it's the refrigerator, it might be something else. And then I can kind of hear the uh, very slight sort of tinnitus in my ears. Think about all this stuff that's going on, you know. So we've got these like three different drones that have very different qualities. If I focus on the drone of the computer, I can start to sort of hear different aspects to it. You know, it's sort of, I'm like, oh yeah, there's actually like a more lower pitch and then there's a slightly higher pitch. And the drone of the computer sounds more sort of staticky in a way, fuzzy, whereas the drone of the refrigerator is it's like it's much more soft. So I mean, like, there's all of these things going on, and I mean, anything, right? Any ordinary thing, you just go out into the world, and you are immediately confronted with this just vibrant and rich aesthetic value. Um, I think that's actually one of the respects in which, as much as I tend to have fairly pessimistic sentiments about existence in general, I think when it comes to like aesthetic appreciation, um, we've, like, things are really good in that particular respect. There really is just so much to appreciate, and I find that I'm never really bored, because no matter what I'm doing, I can always just like switch on. I can basically always perform 433 and get something out of it. And of course, 433 is about sounds, but you can do basically the same with, vision and touch and anything else. It just doesn't matter what's going on. I can just switch that on, and I start finding things to appreciate. Okay. I challenge conventional wisdom, even to the point of getting myself into trouble. Well, I probably do challenge conventional wisdom, I think, in some respects. Maybe not in others, I'm quite happy to accept that, look, I've been born in a particular society, inculcated with particular values, and I don't necessarily have a problem just going along with them. So there are, the sort of liberal values, let's say, the socially progressive sort of values. I don't really challenge those. But everybody has communities that they are part of. Here's the thing, like, when you say, like, I challenge conventional wisdom, it's like, well, conventional with respect to which community, right? I think pretty much everybody has got communities that they are part of where they're going to, broadly speaking, just go along with the conventions of those communities. So with respect to the conventional views in society as a whole, I suppose I probably do challenge them in some ways. As for getting myself into trouble, well, I wish that I did, but the truth is I don't. I mean, the worst that happens is that I sometimes get people online saying that they hate me and sending me death threats and stuff, but I don't really care about that. So, yeah, nothing bad has ever happened to me. So I'm going to say that I neither agree nor disagree with this one. The concept of sin is outdated and not relevant to modern society. Well, I say I agree with that, but I'm not going to say I fully agree because okay, the reason why I said I agree is because obviously for me, I just don't. I mean, like sin, who cares? In fact, no, I will say I agree with that. Um, on the one hand, it may well be the case that that the way that modern people think about things morally um, still appeals to ideas like sin. I think okay, there's a plausible argument that retributionist attitudes to punishment, for instance, are mm, kind of quite related to the idea of sin. Like somebody has committed a sin, and like once you commit a sin, there's some imbalance in the the moral nature of the world. So you must be punished for that sin, and then like that's going to restore the balance or something, right? Like yeah, probably some people think about things in this way. I don't, and I kind of wish that I wish I lived in a world in which people didn't think about things in that way. So, I mean, on the one hand, like it's probably descriptively relevant to modern society, but I'm going to interpret this as more of a normative claim. That the sort of society that I would want to build would be one where, yeah, I don't have any kind of retributivist attitudes at all. Like the only reason why I would support uh, punishment or even like social disapproval is just because it it might hopefully will have certain effects that I want, right? Like maybe it deters other crime or whatever. But no matter how bad, no matter how much I disapprove of the actions that somebody has committed, um, I'm not going to sort of have any desire for revenge or anything like that. Now that I'm saying this, maybe this doesn't really have anything to do with this stuff about sin, because maybe sin is more about, like original sin in the Christian story. I guess that certainly isn't particularly relevant to modern society. So, yeah, either way, I agree with this. I don't think about things in terms of sin. Um, uh, Reason and faith are not in conflict, but rather work together to provide a complete understanding of the world. So, hmm, well, there's a sense in which I would say that they're not in conflict. And as I mentioned earlier, I think that reason alone tends to be self destructive. Reason alone tends to lead to radical skepticisms. Um, and you probably need to just kind of make assumptions in order to form beliefs at all. So, uh, in that respect, I would say that they're not in conflict. But the thing that's tricky about this is that they kind of are in conflict because the point is that when you make those assumptions, you can kind of see that there's like a tension. Like, so what you want to say is, so you take something like Agrippa's trilemma, right? So um, if I make the claim that P, then I can ask, why do I believe that P? What is the justification for P? And then I can see, well, okay, any justification for P, I'm either going to be appealing to an infinite chain of beliefs, or I'm going to be appealing to a circular chain of beliefs, or I'm just going to bottom out in a belief that is, for which can give no further justification. Okay, so think about that argument, right? So I might say, well, yeah, in order to gain beliefs about the world, maybe I just have to make assumptions. I just have to kind of take a leap of faith and make those assumptions and then work from there. Um, but I would say, to me, that's still in conflict with reason because reason, the sort of conventions of reason, or maybe I should even say the feeling of reason, sort of uh, demands a justification for that assumption, right? Like, so just making an unjustified assumption isn't good enough, right? Like you want there to be a justification for it. You want there to be a reason for it. So it's more like they are in conflict. but they still kind of have to work together. Maybe I would say that. And now, of course, my own view on this is, even when they do work together, you're not going to get a complete understanding of the world. So, do I agree with this or disagree with this? They're not in conflict, but rather work. So, yes, they work together, but yes, they're in conflict, but they don't provide a complete understanding. I think I'm just going to stay right in the middle there. Um, you'll never be happy if you focus too much on the past or future as opposed to the present moment. Uh, so, this is one of those things where I feel uncomfortable making claims about other people. Um, but this is probably true for me. I think it does sort of speak to me, right? Like I find that, as I mentioned earlier, I can do this thing where you sort of switch on something like aesthetic appreciation for just what's happening right now, and I get a lot of pleasure from that, right? And that sort of pleasure, which is, you know, most of the things you do in life, or at least that I do in life, I'm kind of aiming for something else. I'm sort of reaching out, trying to grab for something else. And I don't particularly like being in that state. I know some people do. Some people say the chase is better than the catch. I don't think it is. Um, I don't like the chase at all. And the catch is usually disappointing. It's usually not what you expect, right? So, okay, but I sort of find that much of what happens in life is like, okay, I'm in this state of dissatisfaction, and I'm kind of like trying to like look to a future where things might be better, reach out, try to grab that future, or I look to the past where I had things that I don't have anymore, and I kind of wish I could bring those things back, right? Like I look at the past where I remember, being in my early years, doing my degree, sort of thinking like, hey, maybe I'm going to actually become part of the academic institution, and that was sort of a dream I had, and then it didn't happen, and I kind of want to go back to that. So I'm in this state of striving, and that's kind of unpleasant. But then I can just sort of switch that off and just appreciate what's happening right now, and that um, that's much better. Now, on the other hand, I mean, one of the problems with my general personality is I don't actually think or plan for the future that much at all. So when I say that I'm sort of reaching out, grabbing for the future, it's usually only for like the next week. I don't make long-term plans. I do wonder if I might be happier in the long run if I did make long-term plans. If I was the kind of person who actually had like, you know, some sort of project for their life. Some people have that. If I had that, maybe I would have been happier. I don't know. So, yeah, I do tend to live in the present moment, and that makes me happier in the present moment. But is it going to make me happier in the long run? I'm not sure. Okay. The ultimate goal of human existence is to achieve a life of virtue and moral action. Well, obviously, I don't agree with that. I don't really think of human existence as having any goals. And as for the goals that a particular person's life has, well, that's just going to depend on what that person's desires and interests are. So I would also say that although I do make moral judgments and I do care about, I suppose, virtue in some sense, right? Like, broadly speaking, there are certain virtuous character traits that are worth promoting, right? Generosity, wit, right? Charitability, those sorts of things. Yes, curiosity, right? Like, I want a world where people have those sorts of character traits, sure. The truth is that most of the time, I don't really think about morality. I mean, I will think about morality much more when I'm doing philosophy than when I'm just in my everyday life, right? And I think that's probably true for a lot of people. I mean, if you think about, like, okay, how often in your life do you actually face moral dilemmas? How often in your daily life do you actually think about, like, well, what would be the moral thing to do here? It just doesn't come up, you know. Most of the time, you just sort of, well, probably just kind of follow the normal social conventions. You probably are mostly self-interested while also having concerns for the people that you know and like. And so, you know, you do things to try to make your own life better and try to make their lives better. But you know, that's not really strongly moralized, right? It's just like, yeah, I mean, I want to live a good life. I want the people I love to live good lives. So yeah, I'm going to try to do things to achieve that. Um, and and then, you know, there are going to be a few cases where you maybe make some significant decision that is morally like a morally significant decision. So maybe you decide to become a vegan. That makes a big difference to your life. That's maybe motivated by some sort of moral argument. And in that case, okay, that makes a difference. But like once you settle into that lifestyle, you just, again, you know, you just follow the conventions, right? Like once you know what the vegan food is, you just follow that rule without really reflecting on it much. And I think that you know, so to me, you know, morality is sort of something that's kind of in the background most of the time. You know, it imposes constraints, but that's all. It's not like the ultimate goal. It's just, you know, one factor among many, right? Like I will think about what we might think of as the moral rules. What moral rules do I want people to follow? And then most of the time, I guess I conform to them. Um, and I think that's probably how it is for most people, and that's okay. I'm not sure that, you know, like, would it be a valuable life, right, to just be obsessively concerned with morality? Maybe, but I don't think there's many people like that. You do sometimes hear about people who will, you know, do things like intentionally try to take high paying jobs just so they can give more money to charity, right? So there'll be people who like give 95% of their income to charity, and then they're really strongly motivated to like have as much income as possible just so they can give more money to charity. I have heard of people like that, but it's pretty rare, and I certainly don't see why that would be, you know, the ultimate goal. Okay, I'm more interested in pointing out problems than in giving definitive answers to them. Well, yeah, absolutely. I have always preferred the more destructive mode of philosophy. I've always preferred it when philosophers break things down and point out problems with things. And, you know, the constructive stuff can be fun as well, but that's not really what's close to my heart, right? So, um, okay. I am unafraid to challenge authority and to speak my mind, even if it means being shunned by others. I really wish that I could say that I agree with this. I would like to be the kind of person who does challenge authority. Uh, but the thing is that, I mean, it's actually not really in my personality to do so. I mean, I'm just being honest with myself here, right? Like, I actually don't have a very assertive or aggressive personality. Um, and, you know, so especially when it comes to like social situations, I mostly just don't want to be involved. Right? Like that's how I usually feel. Is like I don't really want anything to do with this. Um, so you know, rather than like get out into the world and be challenging things that should be challenged, no, I just kind of sit in my room and you know, I make YouTube videos. And then when I'm making YouTube videos, I'm not going to be doing anything that might get those videos uh, banned, right? That might get me slung off YouTube. I'll follow the rules because, well, I like having an audience. I like, I mean, I do get a little bit of income from it. Not a great deal, but you know, it makes a difference. So, so I am afraid. I would be afraid of losing my channel. I don't want that to happen. I don't want to lose my channel. So that's one thing. And then when it comes to sort of other contexts where I might challenge authority, yeah, I just feel really awkward. And I've had experiences in my life which I look back on and I think, oh God, I really wish I did something there. I remember, for instance, being on a train, and there was somebody on the train who was clearly they were having problems. Like they clearly weren't like mentally all there. I think they were taking diazepam or something, and they were causing a bit of a ruckus, but not in any way that would have been a threat to anyone, right? Like they were just sort of talking quite loud, um, but it, and yeah, I mean they were they were acting in a way that was irritating. But I was looking at this person thinking, okay, they need help, and anyway, I remember there were people on the train who complained about them, and then they were going to get, and then the conductor came, tried to sling them off the train, and I just felt terrible. I really wish I'd said something to speak up for them, because it seemed like this person, I didn't feel right about them being thrown off the train, basically. Um, anyway, I didn't say anything. I just sat there, and that's pretty much what I'll do in those sorts of situations. So yeah, as it turns out, I'm a total coward, and I actually don't really challenge authority. Uh, so maybe I have to say I disagree. No, I won't say I completely disagree. But I worry that even saying that I'm in the middle there is more just wishful thinking. It's more just a matter of, I wish I was the sort of person who did that, but I'm really not. I'm very meek. Um, I believe in the inherent dignity of all human beings. No, no. I don't know what the hell is inherent dignity. What even is that? I mean, look, there are some human beings I like and some human beings I don't, and that's about as far as I'll go with that one. So sure, I do think look, when it comes to like everybody should be equal under the law. Yeah, sure, that's a nice ideal, right? Like I agree with it in as far as that goes, but I mean that's more just a kind of practical thing, right? Like if I was accused of a crime, I would want the legal system to follow the proper procedures. So I think yes, everybody should have legal rights, political rights, all of that. But like inherent dignity of all human beings, like look, there's a few humans I enjoy being with, and most of them seem to suck. So that's my take on human beings. Um, the state is a tool for oppression and should keep growing or become ever more organized. Well, uh, the state is a tool for oppression, but should keep growing or become ever more organized. Well, I would prefer that it didn't. Or at least I certainly don't. I certainly don't endorse the view that it should keep growing or become ever more organized. So wait, do I agree or disagree with that? Because I kind of want to agree with the stuff about it being a tool for. This is really weird. Like it's. I always wonder if this was just written incorrectly or something. Like maybe there's a missing word here. I feel like the state is a tool for oppression and should not keep growing or become ever more organized would make more sense. But yeah, based on what's said there, I just have to say I neither agree nor disagree. I'm a strong willed and determined individual who rarely gives up on achieving my goals. Not really, no. I mean, I will. Yeah, I have lots of goals that I don't really care about achieving. And even when I do care about achieving my goals, I'm not usually going to put much effort into achieving them. Uh, so, I, yeah, I mean, I'm not. Like, I will mostly just do what sort of brings me pleasure in the moment. And it so happens that, I've been lucky, right? So, um, because I enjoy making YouTube videos, I've just continued to do it, and as a result, I've built up this channel and this audience. But I just enjoy it. Because I enjoy doing philosophy, I was able to do a degree and a master's and a PhD. I mean, that's a significant achievement, right? A PhD is not everyone could do that. But the truth is, it wasn't a product of being strong-willed. It was just a product of like I really enjoyed the subject, or at least I felt some sort of drive to do the subject. Um, Maybe I should say that if I didn't do it, I felt bad, right? Like if I don't make, say with like the YouTube, if I don't make enough videos, then I feel bad. If I don't, similarly, if I didn't sort of continue writing the PhD thesis, right? If I didn't write enough, if I didn't meet my schedule, I would feel bad about that. Um, but it was really just a kind of moment to moment thing where like I'm just doing what I'm driven to do in a given moment. Um, so and there are plenty of goals, as I said, where yeah, I will give up on them. So I disagree with that. I have no need to listen to or consider the opinions of others. I mean, of course, I don't really need to, but I do enjoy listening to and considering the opinions of others. So I'll say that yeah, I disagree, and I certainly think that my own work is better as a result of the interactions that I've had with other people. Um, I really could not have done this on my own. So disagree. When reasoning about something, I set out with a deliberate goal in mind. No, not really. Most of the time, I just sort of get an interest in a particular argument, and then I will see where it goes. At least I think. Now there are certainly cases where I do set out. You know what? I'm not going to say I totally disagree with this because obviously, yeah, there are cases where I will have a deliberate goal. So there are cases where, um, like if I'm making a video, for instance, there might be some conclusion that I want to draw, or maybe some point that I want to make, and then I'm like, okay, I have to figure out what argument to use to get there. Similarly, when I was writing my PhD thesis, there were certain conclusions that I had to draw. There were certain steps of the argument that had to be made, and then I had to reason about how to get there. So, we don't always follow the argument wherever it leads. Very often we have a goal in mind, and then we try to come up with arguments that get us to that goal. Actually, this happens. Yeah, I mean this does happen quite a lot, doesn't it? Um, maybe I should say that maybe I should move more towards the agree side there, because yeah, I mean very often like you know conversations and debates, they're kind of like a game. Like I have my position, you have your position, and then we look for reasons that justify our position. I mean, I do change my mind about things, but that's a much more like long-term process. In any given context where I'm reasoning about something, it's usually because I'm aiming to like figure out what's wrong with a particular criticism of my views. So or I'm aiming to come up with an argument in defense of my views. Uh, so, okay, there are cases where I will be looking at arguments and I'll just get interested in one of them and I'll just follow it wherever it goes. And then there are cases where, yeah, I have particular goals and I reason in order to achieve those goals. So, actually, I'm just going to say neither agree nor disagree. The drive for recognition is fundamental to human nature. I'm not sure, well, okay, do I even buy the idea of human nature? If there is human nature, I would probably see that as a massive idea, as a significant idealization. But drive for recognition, well, I don't know. I mean, most people seem to want others to know about them and recognize their achievements, I guess. Um, I'm just going to say that I lean more towards disagreeing, because at least for me, I I don't think I care so much about recognition, um, and I also don't really buy the idea of human nature. Or at least I think that has a lot of problems. So I'll say I lean more towards disagree with that. Okay, gender is a social construct more so than a biological fact. Yeah, I think I pretty much agree with that. It seems to me that this is kind of the point of introducing the concept gender in the first place, right? So we have a biological distinction between males and females, but then among human beings, well, we have a culture. Like, yeah, we have this kind of we have culture, and we have social roles, social conventions, language. We have much more sort of sophisticated psychological states, and gender is part of all of that, right? So you start out with this biological distinction between males and females, and then as a result of that biological distinction, sort of closely intertwined with it, we find that human beings tend to organize their societies around that biological distinction. So then you end up with gender. But gender is, as it seems to me, it's really about that social organization. The social organization, which again is intertwined with the biological stuff, but which is separate from it. Actually, I mean, it's kind of like, even when it comes to, say, sex. So you could say, for instance, like, sex more is sort of more so about the like overall body than it is merely the chromosomes, right? So obviously there's this distinction between different chromosomes, and then as a result of chromosomal differences, you get sex differences. But the sex difference is not, so like, to say that somebody is a biological male is not just to say that they have XY chromosomes. It's more, I think, that the XY chromosomes cause one to be a biological male. So really, it's like, to be a biological male is to produce small gametes. It's to have a particular types of reproductive organs, and then there are hormonal particular types of hormones and so on that are associated with it. So yeah, I mean, biological sex is just, okay, we observe organisms, we see that they that tends to be this, that there is this distinction between different organisms, and that distinction is caused by, like, the chromosomes play a significant causal role. I think the relation between gender and sex is kind of similar to the relation between, like, between the sex of the body and the distinction between the chromosomes. Yeah, as I use the term gender, I would put it on the social side, and I think that gender is, it's highly sensitive to social circumstances, which is not necessarily to say that it's particularly easy to change, but and when I say change, I mean change the gender norms. Obviously, I mean, I think that an individual person can change their gender, but I mean the sorts of uh, uh, regularities that we observe that differentiate men from women, right? Those regularities are not necessarily easy to change, any more than it would be easy to change one's chromosomes, or whether or not you produce large or small gametes. Okay, yeah, so that's where I am on that. Getting involved in politics is detrimental to living a happy life. Well, look, I mean, we're just talking about me, right? It's my personality. I can't speak for everybody, but I don't think I would want to be involved in politics at all. There's there's too much of it where, like, in order to succeed in politics, I would first of all have to, like, figure out how to manipulate people, and that just seems like a huge amount of work, something I'm not particularly interested in. I don't actually like other people in general. I mean, there's some specific people that I like, but, like, human beings in general, I don't really want to have to think about them too much. So if it's just like I'm sitting down having a one-on-one conversation about a subject I love, say philosophy, then I can deal with other people. But when I think about humanity in general, well, I'd rather not think about it. And if I'm in politics, then human beings, that's going to be my work, right? Like, I have to figure out how to make human beings do what I want them to do. And so, yeah, I would absolutely hate that. I would hate having to basically put on an endless performance. Because again, if you want to succeed in politics, you've got to play the right role. You've got to make compromises. And I mean, everybody does that to some extent, of course, right? Like, even doing this channel, for instance, I'm to some extent sort of playing a little bit of a role. But I think that, I mean, it's a very difficult concept to make, like, precise, right? Authenticity, right? What is it to be authentic? I feel like, but I want to say, yeah, I'm fairly authentic, right? Like what you get when you watch this channel is basically me. It's my, it's who I am. It's what I think. It's my personality. Um, when I was doing philosophy and I was writing philosophy articles, I had to be a bit more constrained. I couldn't just be as authentic. There are much more strict rules about how to express yourself. But the good thing about doing philosophy is that I just happen to love philosophy, and it happens to be quite close to how I want to express myself anyway. So although I was playing a bit of a performance, my PhD was not totally authentic. It was still pretty close to how I tend to think about things. But when it comes to politics, I mean, no way. It would just be a character. I'd be playing a character, and I don't want to do that. Uh, there is great complexity, perhaps even power, in being overlooked. I have no idea. I mean, like what? I want to. I mean, I kind of disagree with this. I don't see any particular power in being overlooked. But I'm also not really sure what this is even asking. This is a bit. This just seems strange. Like, it's great. I mean, I suppose if you're overlooked, you can kind of manipulate things from behind the scenes, perhaps. Um, but then, uh, you know, like it's gonna depend on what you do with your secrecy, right? Um, Reality is fundamentally fluid and impermanent. I suppose my my inclination is to agree with this because I tend to take a sort of very voluntaristic perspective on um, on beliefs about the world, um, and I think that certainly it's certainly the case that experience is such that um, it supports a variety of different and just highly incompatible models. And I mean, I'm a relativist about truth and facts. So yeah, I mean, what there is, like what the world is like, what there is in the world, um, is going to be dependent on perspective. So I can take a perspective where it's a fact that the sky is blue, or I can take a perspective where it's a fact that the sky has a variety of different colors, or I can take a perspective where there just is no sky. So I can make the world in many ways, and these are often going to be ways that are incompatible. I think that if I consider just my own experience, it seems very clear that it is malleable in all sorts of ways. I mean, I can very easily take it either that there is this world of objects around me, like an external world, a common sense external world that contains hands and tables and chairs and all of that, or I can just kind of flip the necker cube, as it were, and um, just take this as as a dream, as as like uh, a falsehood. Like maybe it's just me, and right, none of this stuff accurately represents anything that's happening out there. Um, so with those sorts of points in mind, yeah, I think that I can adopt and drop different perspectives sort of at will that like make the world in different ways. Um, and so I guess that would be kind of in line with this idea that reality is fundamentally fluid and impermanent. The problem is with this is that you know I can adopt and drop perspectives at will, but like one of the perspectives you can adopt is a perspective according to which there are rigid fundamental laws, and things actually aren't fluid and impermanent. I mean, yeah, you can totally do that, right? Like clearly, you can adopt the perspective of I suppose what we might think of as the common sense physicalist worldview, um, and in that case, there are various fixed natural kinds. They operate according to fixed laws. That is also available. So that's why I'm not saying I fully agree with this, but I suppose this the spirit of this statement is in line with my attitudes. History is necessarily a progression towards greater freedom and self-consciousness. No, I'm not particularly inclined towards a progressivist view of history. I tend to think that, you know, I would be inclined to say that by most of the standards by which we judge quality of life, the quality of life of a sort of middle class person living in the UK is pretty high, right? And it's probably higher than what you had really at any other time in history, right? So like I may well be one of the luckiest people in history. The problem is though is that first of all, there's plenty of people even today, right, even living right now, who have not really received the benefits of civilization, right? I don't think that a sulfur miner in Indonesia has it better than a hunter-gatherer 100,000 years ago. So these benefits are unfortunately not exactly spread equally. But even putting that aside, the thing is that so when I look at history, I'm no expert, but it's very questionable to me. Like, at what point did we start really reaping the benefits of civilization? It does seem to be the case that when civilization first developed through, when you had like the Neolithic Revolution and you started getting agriculture and so on, that was pretty bad. Like, it was kind of a disaster. It looks like, life expectancy dropped. It looks like you started to get much higher rates of like malnutrition. You started to get much higher rates of disease because as people became sedentary, they were sort of living in one place with denser populations, and they were started to like interact with animals and so on. And all of these factors just make them much more susceptible to disease. And then you start getting like mass warfare and things like that, like systematic warfare. So there are plenty of problems associated with civilization. And actually, civilization seems like it kind of sucked up until pretty damn recently. And moreover, do we want to say that? So, like, insofar as so that's one point, right? It's not clear to me historically that there's been like a trend, any general trend towards improvement. There may well have been significant improvements in like the last couple of 100 years, but I'm not sure there's any general trend. Moreover, looking into the future, is this even sustainable? Like, okay, we have a bunch of problems. We have climate change and resource depletion and biodiversity loss and topsoil depletion and ocean acidification, all of these things. So I don't know. It doesn't at the moment look like it's particularly sustainable. If we were to kind of correct the population and reduce the population, that in itself might actually lead to a decline of civilization. I'm pretty sure the general consensus is among economists that the larger the population, the greater the sort of technological sophistication, or certainly like the greater the productivity, right? It's kind of funny that in philosophy we have this repugnant conclusion that you get from Parfit, where it's like, well, compare a small population with very high quality of life with a massive population that has lives just barely worth living. Whereas actually it seems that massive populations are what's required to sustain, technological sophistication. Assuming, of course, that technological sophistication is what gives you a good life. But so anyway, okay, it doesn't seem like it's that sustainable. And in any case, even if I was a sort of progressivist about human history, I'm not sure that it's a progression towards greater freedom and self-consciousness. I don't know, what the hell is am I more self-conscious than a hunter-gatherer? Like, what the hell does that even mean? As for freedom, well, look, what I've got is, I have medical care, right? I have all sorts of luxury items. I have, a computer, and I can make videos on YouTube, and I have access to food and water and all of that. Freedom is I don't know. I'm also kind of subject to, the laws that are laid down by the government that I have no particular say in. Um, I'm subject to extremely sort of sophisticated technological institutions that I have no control over and actually no real understanding of. Like if I'm living in a tribe in a small scale society, it looks like my ability to kind of influence the direction that we go or the decisions that we make is kind of much greater, right? Like as a person in a kind of modern technological society, I'm a cog in the machine. So yeah, I thoroughly disagree with this. Okay. The key to a good life is to celebrate the order of the universe without trying to control it. Um, I mean, I'm just gonna say that yeah, I mean, for myself, uh, giving up um, the desire to make things like the way I want them to be, giving up that striving is it has been sort of useful. It's a useful tool to improve one's mood. I think like I mentioned earlier. I can just kind of appreciate the present moment. I can sort of just enjoy it aesthetically, and that's those are some of the most positive experiences available. Um, and I think that kind of just accepting that things don't always go your way is yeah, that seems to be a useful sort of cycle. Okay, I've always been very, uh, um, very easily able to accept loss, just in general, um, and that includes everything from like maybe something breaks, like maybe an external hard drive where I've got lots of music breaks, all the way to people dying, like my mum dying. Um, this is something that it's not ever something that really like deeply bothers me. I obviously don't want these things to happen, right? Like, I mean, obviously, when my mum died, that was a terrible thing. I wish she was still alive, but I never experienced like any sort of deep grief about it. Um, so for me, look, there's lots of good things in my life, and those good things are probably not going to last forever. But that's okay. I'm happy to look at things where it's like I can appreciate the fact that the things happened, and I can be like, okay, now I have good memories, and that's fine. So I had a great relationship with my mum, and she died, and that sucked. But okay, I move on, and I now have I'm left with good memories, right? That's the sort of attitude I have, and I do feel like I'm quite lucky to have that attitude. I'm glad that I have it. I'm not somebody who experiences like these deep attachments that then lead to a lot of suffering when I lose the thing I'm attached to, and I wouldn't change myself. So, um, the concept that there is some inner rational force driving history is nonsense. Uh, sure, I mean, I mean, yeah. I think the concept that there's some inner rational force, even driving things like the construction of knowledge, for instance, is also nonsense. Like, I mean, I'm pretty strongly on the anti-realist side, even when it comes to things like science, right? I don't think even science is really driven by some rational force. So certainly history in general, no, most of it is going to be just like you know, just there's people, right? People uh, with all sorts of different inclinations and desires. Many of them are corrupt. Many of them are malicious. Um, I think that, and very often you find that people's intentions um, are unable to be realized, right? So like even if there were a bunch of people, individuals who were perfectly rational, even if you had Plato's philosopher kings, I don't think that that history, in the sense of like the development of human societies, would be something that could be uh, subject to rational control. So the problem is just that like there are so many, human society is just so complex. There are so many unintended consequences of any policy that you enact, that it really isn't something that um, we can rationally direct. We just don't like know exactly what's going to follow from some new technological development. We don't you can't predict how that's going to uh, impact society, and even if you could predict it, you're probably still not going to be able to control it. So like if we take something like AI, let's say for instance that AI, the people who are currently um, worried about the consequences of AI. Let's say that they're right, right? Let's suppose that AI really will be dangerous. Well, I mean, we might be able to slow down the development of AI, but you're not going to stop it, right? It's going to happen, because even if we enacted laws against it, some people would break those laws, or there'd be other countries that have different laws, etc. So it's going to happen. This stuff just isn't controllable. So on the one hand, it's like you have human beings who are not particularly rational, who have all sorts of different goals, very often self-interested, um, and and then there's the fact that societies of human beings are so complex that anything we do has unintended consequences, and they're also kind of uncontrollable. So yeah, I don't think that history is going anywhere. I don't see how there could be some rational force driving history. I don't see anywhere in this on this particular stage for the action of an inner rational force. Ethics and morality can be objectively determined and applied to all situations. Well, obviously I disagree with that one. I don't think I really need to elaborate on that, right? Like, if you've seen any of my videos, you know where I stand on that. I can enjoy trolling or teasing people. Yes, I can enjoy it. I can enjoy it. I used to do it a lot more. I've calmed down a little bit now, perhaps, but I still can enjoy being a bit of a troll. Um, Women's experiences and perspectives should be valued and included in all areas of society. That seems like a bit of a no-brainer. I mean, obviously the answer to that is I agree. So, so yeah, yeah, include women, value women, obviously. Despair is a fundamental aspect of the human experience. Um, I mean, I suppose. Yeah, it does seem to be. I don't know actually. I actually don't. I don't experience a lot of despair. Um, Maybe my life. Maybe I've just been lucky, right? Um, I'm not particularly happy, right? So I wouldn't say that my life is good, but it's not terrible. So, well, maybe it is terrible, but it's not really terrible. It's not terrible enough for me to be despairing about things. Um, But as for like, I mean, fundamental aspect of the human experience. I mean, look, I take it that pretty much everybody at some point or another in their lives is probably going to experience despair. I think that despair is, one of those emotions that, has a great deal of influence on everything we do. It sort of stands there. It's one of the things that motivates us to try to succeed in our lives because we want to avoid it. It's one of the things that, has manifested itself in all sorts of different artworks in all sorts of different ways. I can't help but think that when you look at human beings and you want to sort of ask like, what is it like to be us? What is it like to be human? You're going to have to say something about despair, right? Yeah. So I guess I'll say that I lean towards agreeing with that. Body and mind are deeply interconnected. There is no such thing as a soul independent of the body. Well, yeah, I suppose I lean towards agreeing with that one. I mean, if I'm going to be sort of carving the world up such that I organize it into bodies and minds, then I would probably see the mind as being something that is, you know, manifested in the body, right? It's yeah, and I certainly don't think that there are like, you know, souls floating around, you know, Cartesian souls floating around in the ether, that are independent of our bodies. So, you know, when the physical body dies, is my, like, are my, you know, mental states going to be preserved in some non-physical soul? No, I don't see any good reason for expecting that. Um, so I'm going to say, I guess I agree with that one. Okay, finish. So let's see. Let's see where I am. Well, I don't know. Can you see that? Is that coming up? Yeah, you should be able to see that. So it's telling me that I'm apparently I'm Lao Tse. 85%. Am I pronouncing that right? Lao Tse. 75% Socrates, de Beauvoir, 70% Kierkegaard, only 25% Heraclitus, 15% Hegel. Okay, that's apparently what I am. Um, so, founder of Taoism. I got confused there because I always pronounce it Taoism, but then it says it with a T here. So, yeah. Okay, well, that's the end of that one. I thanks for watching, I guess. um, okay then, it's kind of funny that it selected him because, you know, I'm sort of an analytic and he's not at all analytic, but maybe we do have similarities in terms of other attitudes. And actually, I suppose none of these are particularly analytic. I mean, who's the closest to an analytic here? I guess Aquinas. I certainly wouldn't want to be 85% Aquinas. All right.